Hello everybody, my name is Drew Willer and today I will be presenting to you my senior capstone. For my capstone this year, I was tasked with designing a living room chair with functional ergonomics. I'm going to start off with a number. This number is a very large number and it represents the number of people in the US alone that suffer annually from chronic back pain. And specifically, this could be lower back pain, upper back pain, or any sort of spinal pain. And this number is very important to me because several of my close family members and friends that I know are part of this statistic and suffer annually from chronic back pain. So as I was searching for a topic to do my senior capstone on, this number really stuck with me, and I wanted to find something that I could produce, a product-based solution that could help this number and help these people that are constantly dealing with chronic back pain. And as you may know, how we sit and the chairs that we sit on and the furniture that we use day to day plays a very large role in our back pain. So if you're sitting on poor quality furniture for long periods of time, you are going to have prolonged and increased back pain. And this number, for context, is no small number. It is roughly the size of 7 Ohios. So this was something that was not only affecting me and my family, but was affecting many people around the US and really around the world. So this was very important to me as I set up this project. And I started creating for myself a design purpose and a design statement. And I came up with this one. How might I design a living room chair that is both aesthetic and ergonomically beneficial to people who suffer from back pain? I'm going to walk you through my project. To start off this project, I knew immediately that I would have to dive deep into some research. I knew this was a very medically and anatomically heavy project, and I wanted to make sure that I had all of my facts straight and my research done well. After I researched my project, I started ideating, and this involved thinking about how potential adjustment elements and mechanical elements would blend with the form of the chair and the aesthetics, how the chair would look in general, things that I could add to the chair to make it more beneficial to the user, things like that. Another early stage for me was prototyping. This was something that I started almost immediately with because I wanted this chair to be based in how it feels and not just how it looks. Oftentimes when living room furniture especially is so concentrated on its appearance that the ergonomics gets lost and you end up sitting on a chair that really isn't supporting you well at all, but it looks good. So I really wanted this to be designed with the function in mind first, and then of course have a good aesthetic appearance as well. Then I'll take you through a couple renderings that I did to show off this chair's mechanical elements as well as its general form. And for this project, I was able to work with a local furniture manufacturing company called Fortner in the Columbus area, and they allowed me to come into their shop and use their amazing set of tools and all of the resources that they had available to me there, including expert opinions and upholstery help. And I was able to make a 2-scale model of this piece of furniture, and that was a 2-part process. It started off with woodworking for the general frame and wrapped up literally with upholstery for the final touches. So let's get into some of my research. Again, right away, I knew that this would be a very research-heavy project at the forefront, and I also knew that I really didn't know much about proper ergonomics and good posture. So to start off this project, I immediately got in touch with a professional. I was able to have the privilege of sitting down with our family chiropractor, Dr. Dirk Heising, and he gave me quite a bit of valuable insight on this project. He really walked me through what quality ergonomics means. What does it mean to be properly supported when you're sitting, and what are things that I needed to keep in mind when designing a chair that was specifically designed to alleviate back pain in the user. Now, as you might know, proper ergonomics, especially when sitting in an office chair, looks something like this middle image. And this is a very stiff position, and it works well when you're at a office setting or working at a computer or something like that, where your torso is at 90 degrees with your legs and your feet are flat on the floor, your knees are bent at 90 degrees. However, in a living room setting where you're wanting to relax, watch some TV, catch up on your favorite show, or even talk to your family, this is really not the position that you want to be in. This is not a very comfortable, reclined, relaxed position. It's very stiff and upright. So I discovered that there was a fine line between keeping a medically sound ergonomic posture and status and having a relaxed position. And I knew that this was a fine line that I needed to walk. So when I started making my goals for this project, this was the first one. And it was to maintain a low profile piece that is comfortable to relax in while still promoting quality, medically sound ergonomics. My second goal was to blend quality and aesthetics in a way that does not compromise on either. I didn't want ergonomics taking over so much that the chair was an eyesore, but I also didn't want my chair to fall into the pitfalls that most living room chairs fall into, where you aren't getting quality support and it only looks good. It doesn't feel good. Thirdly, I wanted to create a piece that could be used by many users of different heights and weights. I wanted as many people as possible to get the full extent out of this chair and to feel comfortable doing so and not feel like they didn't fit with this chair just because they were tall or maybe a little bit larger or something like that. So I really wanted this chair to be open to as many bodies as I possibly could. And my final challenge for myself was more of a personal challenge, but I wanted to challenge myself in my personal craftsmanship and push myself to attempt new skills that I had never attempted before. So with my goals set up and my research done, I started pulling inspiration from my research more specifically. And I found that as I dug even deeper into my research, I was pulling inspiration from two main segments. And the first segment was Ray and Charles Eames. Now, you are probably familiar with some of their work. They're quite famous, and they do a lot of very iconic living room chairs. And I took particular inspiration from the shell chair. And I looked into their process for how they developed this chair, and I thought it very interesting that they didn't actually begin form ideation until after they had built this prototyping jig. And basically what this jig allowed them to do was to adjust each and every element of the chair's seat pan, backrest, and that little lumbar support area down there. And it allowed them to adjust each one little fractions at a time, sit in it and get a feel for what it felt like and take those notes. And this allowed them to really dial in their chair's feel before they even started thinking about what it would look like. And this was something that I really wanted to take into my project. I really was inspired by how they started with the feel of the chair rather than the look. Secondly, I found myself pulling inspiration from automotive seats because I realized that automotive seats are basically doing exactly what I set out to do with a low profile status while still maintaining proper ergonomics. As a bonus, automotive seats also incorporated quite a bit of adjustability. The chairs in your car probably adjust their lumbar support, their seat pan depth, and the backrest angle. So this was something that I found very interesting, and I found quite a bit of value in this as it was basically accomplishing my goal. So I asked myself how I could pull bits from both of these items and use them in my production. So again, something that was very important to me to get into as soon as I could was prototyping. And much like the Ray and Charles Eames process, I started by creating a prototype jig. And what this jig allowed me to do, it was more of a threefold benefit. So firstly, I was able to test all of the different angles that my backrest and seat pan were able to sit at. This allowed me to actually sit in my prototype and get a feel of how each angle felt to the user. And I was able to adjust it, sit in it, and then take notes on what I liked and didn't like. And eventually I was able to really dial in an angle that I found very comfortable while still allowing for good support for the user. The second thing that I was able to test with this prototype was the lumbar support. And the lumbar support is one of the most important parts of this project and for supporting proper posture in general. And I was able to ensure that the lumbar support was a good thickness and a good height for the majority of users by actually being able to sit in it and set it up for myself. Thirdly, I was also able to mess around with different foam types, and foam plays a very large role in how a chair feels. So I was able to collect several foam samples from Fortner, and I was able to set each of them up on the chair and feel what they felt like, and kind of dial in how firm the foam needed to be for the lumbar support, the backrest, and the seat cushion. I wanted something that was not too cushy to the point where you're not getting that support that you need, kind of like a lazy boy type situation, but that wasn't so firm that it was uncomfortable and that you felt like you were sitting on a rock or like a hospital waiting room chair. So I was really able to dial in that to a point where I was very happy with it. From there, I moved on to my sketching, and this was fairly late in the process compared to most things that I had done before. Usually, one of the first things that I did was begin sketching, so I was able to experiment with sort of a different process, and I actually quite enjoyed it. I had a lot of ideas for this project, and I sketched them all out. I really wanted this form to be very tight, very clean, classic. I didn't want it to be too trendy or modern to the point where it wouldn't be relevant in a couple years. I wanted this to be something that would be able to stick around for quite a while. But I also didn't want it to be obvious that this was a chair that was designed to help a user with back pain. I didn't want them to be self-conscious that they needed a chair like that. I wanted this to be right at home in really any living room, any trendy space, any classic space. I really wanted this to be a team player in terms of where it could be. So I ended up sort of refining my sketches into the forms that you see on the right-hand side there. And I really became interested in this 3-layer, almost like stack of cushions on the back. I felt that this form lent itself very naturally to what I was attempting to do with different density foams in the lumbar support and the backrest. And on top of it, it just looks really clean and is sort of like a little bit more eye-catching. It's not just one cushion, it has a little bit more of a texture. So with my form nailed down, I realized that I would need some sort of adjustability within this chair. And I knew that I wanted the lumbar support and the armrests to adjust around the user, which involved the seat pan staying stationary. And this was a challenge in and of itself. And in order to accomplish this, I would need some sort of mechanical elements that would allow the chair to slide up and down and quickly lock in place. I knew it needed to slide easily, and I didn't want this to be a big effort for the user. If the user was maybe, say, an older person that has less upper body strength, I didn't want them to have to really exert themselves to get it adjusted to where they needed to be. I also knew that it needed to lock in place quickly. There wasn't really any room for this to slide back down. It needed to hold its position once the user got it in the correct position. It also would need to hold its position under weight because, again, this is armrest and lumbar support. These are parts of the chair that the user is putting their weight back against and on, and it needed to be strong in that way. I also wanted it to integrate into the overall form, and I didn't want the mechanics to be an eyesore or be obvious that there was something going on internally. I wanted this to just flow very naturally, be able to perform its function while looking like any other chair. And I also didn't want it to be overly expensive to manufacture. I didn't want to have to create and fabricate a bunch of custom parts that would be expensive to produce. I wanted this to be something that could be pretty low cost while still being quality. So I started thinking about wood clamps, and I realized that wood clamps have exactly the requirements that I was thinking about back on that list. They are able to slide. They are able to lock in place when you need them to. They're also able to withstand quite a bit of force because when you're clamping wood, all of the force that's on that wood clamp is quite a bit. So they're able to hold weight. And I started thinking about how I could modify this, removing some of these pieces that I didn't need. And after I did all of that, after I removed the extraneous parts, I was left with this sort of little capsule here. And the key portion that I was interested in was this locking lever here. When this lever moves up and down, it locks and unlocks, and it's quite easy. And I realized that if I could extend that out to where the user could interact with it to unlock it, and then release it to lock it again, this would actually be quite a successful way of making my mechanics work. So once my mechanics were nailed down, I started thinking about how I was going to build this frame, because again, the main challenge here was that the seat pan had to remain stationary and the rest of the chair would adjust around the user. This isn't easy. So I started thinking about how this could be built, and I realized that I needed to build it in two sections. The first section would be made of poplar hardwood in order to be a very sturdy base. It would remain stationary and it would hold that seat pan in place. It would also support the adjustable section. The second section would be an upholstered section made from CNC'd plywood, and it would be the part that would adjust to the different body types. This is what the frame would end up looking like. The brown part is the upholstered part that it does the adjusting, and the gray part is stationary and holds in place the seat pan. This is something like what the adjustment would look like. It would adjust up and down, as you see there, allowing the seat pan to stay in place and stationary. Now, one of the main bits of feedback that I got very early on in this project when I was prototyping was that the seat pan was very deep, especially for users with shorter legs. So while it felt nice for me at 6'2", a 5'4" person might not feel quite at home as I do in this chair. So I started thinking how I could accommodate for some sort of seat pan adjustment. And I realized that adding in a separate adjustment point for the seat pan would just add extra mental load to this project, and I didn't want that to be the case. So I started thinking how I could add in that seat pan adjustability to my existing adjustability, and I realized that if I made the upholstered section adjust at a slight angle, that it would actually go in and deepen the seat pan when it raises up for higher users, and when it goes down for shorter users, it becomes more of a shallow seat pan. So that actually worked out quite well. Now, the way that this would all go together is the clamps would be screwed onto the frame like this. The upholstered section would be dropped in place and attached to the sliding section of the clamp. And that would all be able to adjust. The upholstered section would adjust on those sliding portions. So now that I had all of this in my head and somewhat in CAD and in a digital format, I needed to begin to construct it physically. So first of all, I started with the sides of the hardwood frame. And each side was, again, constructed with hardwood poplar, and it was custom cut. I attached it to some pre-milled legs and glued and screwed it all together. Once I constructed each of the two sides, I assembled them with cross beams and more wood glue and screws. On to the next part, I mocked up the sides of the chair that were going to be upholstered in order that my measurements were spot on before I sent them over to be CNC'd at Fortner. Once I sent them over to Fortner, they CNC'd them, and I assembled my subframe for the upholstered section. Now that my frame was done, it was time to get into laying some foam. To start with the foam, I began with what's called LS pad. And basically all that this is it's a very thin, very dense, fibrous padding that really just rounds out the harsh edges of the wood and makes everything a little bit softer. If you don't have this down, the foam and upholstery can be prone to tearing over time. So this is really just a protection layer between the foam and your nice upholstered fabric. Once I put that down, I put down a layer of foam. I went with 1/2-inch foam on this in order to keep that really sculpted form of the armrests. On top of the foam, I put a layer of what's called Dacron, and basically all that this is it's a very soft, fibrous polyester material that is used to further round out any harsh edges and just add another layer of protection against the foam. It also aids in upholstery because the fabric slides a little bit more easily over Dacron than it would over foam, so this is a very important step. After all of these 3 layers were put onto the chair, it was time to get into fabric. And for the actual upholstery of the piece, we began by cutting panels that were measured from the chair. They were put together, and with a single stitch, and they were cut out, leaving a half-inch seam allowance so that the seamstress could attach them correctly. After my pieces were sewn up, they were attached to the chair by using a little bit of spray adhesive and pulling the fabric tight over the chair, stapling it in place. Any parts that weren't sewn together were just tucked under a part that you wouldn't see on the chair and stapled in place again. For the final part, we stained the hardwood frame with a warm, nice, simple mid-modern tone, and I was able to spray it with a satin clear coat, which really gave it a very nice professional finish. And this is a full view of the chair and what it would look like today. A couple of features I want to bring your attention to are the backrest and lumbar support, which indeed are two separate cushions utilizing two different densities of foam. The backrest is a little bit more of a squishy, comfortable foam, while the lumbar support has a little bit more rigidity and a little bit more firmness in order to give that lower back the support that it needs. I also included a small little section underneath the chair to act as a bookshelf, and this wasn't necessary, but it sure helps the chair feel a little bit more at home in a living room setting, which was the whole goal of the project. This just gives the user another option to use this chair to its full potential and just add a little bit of convenience to the experience. I also designed each section of cushion, including the backrest and lumbar support, with removable covers so that if any spills happen or any damage happens to the cushion at any point, the cover could just be removed and replacements or cleaning could be made as necessary. So, did I accomplish my initial goals? Well, my first goal was to maintain a low-profile piece that is comfortable to relax in while still promoting quality ergonomics, and I do believe that I accomplished that. I kept in mind ergonomics by incorporating a firmer lower lumbar support, and I kept my piece fairly low profile and added a wide seat pan. My second goal was to blend aesthetics and quality ergonomics in a way that does not compromise on either. I maintained aesthetics and produced an eye-catching design without hindering my mechanical function and making my form work with my mechanics. For my third goal, to create a piece that can be used by many different users of heights and weights, I incorporated adjustable lumbar support and armrests to adjust to different bodies. I was able to adjust the seat pan depth as well to adjust for shorter and taller people. And I made sure that my seat pan was wide enough to accommodate many different body types. And for my fourth goal, my personal goal to challenge myself in my craftsmanship and push myself to attempt new skills. Well, I sure did learn some new skills that I had never attempted before, such as welding and upholstery, and I also had the opportunity to improve existing skills such as woodworking, problem solving, and to-scale prototyping. That's all for my presentation. I thank you very much for watching, and I hope you have a good rest of your day.